Admiral Veltar stood before the massive viewing screen on his flagship. The blue and green planet Earth slowly turned below them, but now it looked different. Brown scars covered the continents where once great cities had stood. Smoke still rose from some areas even 6 months after their final attack. "The human resistance is finished," Veltar announced to the Galactic Council members watching through holographic displays. "Earth is silent. No communications, no organized military activity, no signs of industrial capacity. The planet is ready for colonization." Councillor Rethvas leaned forward in his chair, his 4 eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "You are certain of this, Admiral?" "The humans have surprised us before with their stubbornness." Veltar's chest swelled with pride. "I am completely certain, Councillor. Our orbital bombardment destroyed every major population center. London, New York, Tokyo, Moscow, Beijing, all reduced to rubble. We've monitored their communication channels for months, nothing. Even their internet has gone completely dark." The other council members nodded approvingly. The war against Earth had lasted 3 years and cost them more ships and soldiers than they had expected. Humans were supposed to be a primitive species, barely capable of spaceflight. Instead, they had fought with a cleverness and determination that shocked the entire galactic coalition. "What about survivors?" asked Councillor Zefny from her water-filled tank. "Scattered groups at best," Veltar replied, pulling up sensor readings on his display. "Our scans show small heat signatures in some underground areas, but nothing organized. Probably just refugees hiding in caves and basements. They pose no threat to our colonization efforts." Far below, in the deep tunnels beneath what had once been Seoul, Dr. So-Jin Park listened to every word through a hidden receiver. She sat in a small chamber carved from rock, surrounded by salvaged electronics and quantum communication equipment. Her dark hair was streaked with gray from months of stress, and her hands were permanently stained from working with circuit boards and wiring. The tunnel around her held 200 other survivors. Families with children, elderly people, former soldiers, and scientists like herself. They had been living underground since the bombardment, surviving on stored food and water they had prepared in secret locations years before the war began. "They think we're finished," whispered Daewon, the former Korean Space Force captain who had become their unofficial leader. He was a tall, thin man with careful eyes who had lost his wife and daughter in the bombing of Busan. So-Jin adjusted her headphones and continued listening to the coalition transmission. "They're planning to start landing troops next week. Survey teams first, then construction crews to build their new cities." An older woman named Hye-jin shook her head sadly. "Maybe we should surrender. What can we do against their entire fleet? We're just hiding in holes like animals." "No," So-Jin said quietly, but with steel in her voice. "We're not animals. We're humans, and humans don't give up." She turned back to her quantum communication array, a device she had been building in secret for the past 4 months. It used technology salvaged from the ruins above, combined with theoretical physics she had been working on before the war. The coalition thought all of Earth's technology was destroyed, but they were wrong. "What is that thing you're always working on?" asked Jinho, a teenager who helped her find electronic components in the ruins. So-Jin smiled for the first time in weeks. "It's a way to talk to people very far away. People the coalition doesn't know exist." Captain Daewon moved closer, studying the strange device with interest. It didn't look like any communication equipment he had seen during his military service. Crystalline structures were connected to quantum processors by hair-thin wires, and the whole assembly hummed with barely contained energy. "Who are you trying to contact?" he asked. "Our people," So-Jin replied simply. Above them, Admiral Veltar concluded his presentation to the Galactic Council. "I recommend we begin Phase 1 colonization immediately. Small survey teams to identify the best locations for our cities, followed by construction crews and the first wave of civilian colonists. Within 2 years, Earth will be a productive member world of the Coalition." "Excellent work, Admiral," Councillor Rethvas said. "The Coalition is pleased with your efficiency in resolving the human problem. Begin landing operations at your discretion." The holographic displays flickered off, leaving Veltar alone on his command deck. He looked down at Earth with satisfaction. Finally, after 3 long years of war, he could declare total victory. The humans had fought better than expected, but in the end, primitive species always fell to superior technology and numbers. His aide, Commander Colvin, approached with a data tablet. "Admiral, the first survey shuttles are ready to launch." "Where should they land first?" Start with the former population centers, Veltar ordered. I want detailed scans of the ruins. Look for anything useful we can salvage and identify locations suitable for our construction projects. Deep in her underground chamber, So-Jin made final adjustments to her quantum array. Her hands moved with practiced precision over the controls, setting frequencies and calibrating power levels. The other survivors watched her work with growing hope and curiosity. Is it ready? Daewon asked. So-Jin nodded and placed her hand on the activation switch. For 3 years, the Coalition has been fighting what they thought was the human military. They destroyed our cities, our factories, our obvious defenses. They think they've won because they can't hear our radios or see our satellites. She looked around at the faces surrounding her. Dirty, tired, but undefeated. But they never understood what they were really fighting. They weren't fighting the human military or the human government. They were fighting humanity itself. And humanity has been preparing for this war much longer than they realize. So Jin pressed the activation switch. The quantum array came to life with a soft blue glow, and energy patterns danced across the crystalline structures. The device began transmitting on frequencies the Coalition couldn't detect, sending coded signals across impossible distances. What's happening? Whispered Jinho. I'm waking up our people, So-Jin replied, watching as her instruments confirmed successful transmission. People the Coalition never knew existed. People who have been waiting for this signal for a very long time. Above them, the first Coalition survey shuttles broke through Earth's atmosphere, heading toward the ruins of major cities. The pilots were confident and relaxed, expecting to find nothing but rubble and maybe a few scattered refugees to relocate. They had no idea they were flying into the most carefully prepared trap in human history. In her underground chamber, So-Jin smiled as her quantum array received its first response signals. Then another. Then dozens more from locations across the galaxy that should have been impossible. Welcome to Phase 2, she whispered. 12 light-years away from Earth, Jiho Kim wiped grease from his hands and closed the engine panel of the Coalition battleship Determined Victory. To his alien crewmates, he was just another human refugee who had been lucky enough to find work as a maintenance technician. They thought he was grateful for their mercy in letting him live. They were completely wrong. Jiho had volunteered for this assignment 7 years ago, long before the war officially began. He had spent months learning Coalition technology, studying their ship designs, and practicing their languages until he could pass for a desperate human civilian seeking work. His small quarters were filled with technical manuals and repair tools, but hidden beneath his bunk was something far more important. A quantum receiver identical to the one So-Jin had built on Earth. When her signal reached him, the device activated with a soft chime that only he could hear. Jiho read the coded message and smiled. The time for hiding was almost over. Meanwhile, on the Coalition supply depot at Kepler Station, Yujin Lee was sorting through refugee applications when her own quantum receiver activated. She was supposed to be a human civilian coordinator, helping other human refugees find temporary housing and work assignments. The Coalition officials thought she was useful for keeping the human workers organized and peaceful. Yujin had actually been a military intelligence officer before volunteering for deep cover operations. She had been monitoring Coalition fleet movements and supply lines for 5 years, sending reports back to Earth through hidden communication channels. The message from So-Jin was exactly what she had been waiting for. Yujin casually finished her paperwork, then walked to her private office. She locked the door and pulled out a small device that looked like a civilian tablet, but was actually something much more powerful. Time to coordinate the family reunion, she whispered, beginning to send coded messages to other human operatives throughout the Coalition's territory. On Earth, the first Coalition survey shuttles landed in the ruins of Tokyo. The pilot, Lieutenant Sektar, stepped out wearing full environmental gear and looked around at the devastation. Twisted metal and broken concrete stretched as far as he could see. Base, this is Survey Team Alpha, he reported through his communicator, landing successful in former Tokyo location. No signs of life. Beginning structural analysis. What Lieutenant Sektar didn't notice was the small camera watching him from the rubble, or the motion sensor that detected his shuttle's landing, or the fact that his communicator signals were being intercepted and recorded by hidden receivers placed throughout the ruins. Beneath Seoul, Tai Hyun Choi was coordinating the surveillance network. He had been a strategic planning officer in the Korean military before the war, and now he was using those skills to track every coalition movement on Earth. They've landed survey teams in 12 locations, he reported to Captain Daewon. All major cities. They're mapping the ruins and looking for salvageable technology. Daewon studied the tactical display Tae-hyun had constructed from their hidden sensors. Red dots marked coalition positions while blue areas showed human survivor settlements. The aliens had no idea how many humans were still alive or where they were located. How long until they find us? Asked Heejin, the older woman who still worried about their chances. They won't find us unless we want them to, Tae-hyun replied confidently. We've been preparing these hiding places for 8 years. The coalition is looking for obvious signs of civilization. Power plants, communication towers, large buildings. They're not looking for people living like their own ancestors did thousands of years ago. So Jin continued working at her quantum array, coordinating with human operatives across dozens of star systems. Each response confirmed what she already knew. Humanity had been planning for this war much longer than the coalition realized. The plan had begun 15 years ago when human intelligence first detected signs of the coalition's expansion toward Earth. While politicians tried diplomacy and the military prepared obvious defenses, a secret program had begun placing human volunteers in deep cover throughout coalition space. These volunteers had given up their normal lives, learned alien languages and customs, and spent years establishing false identities as refugees, workers, and civilians. They had jobs on coalition military ships, supply stations, communication networks, and civilian colonies. To the coalition, they were just part of the large population of humans who had been displaced during the early phases of the war. Harmless refugees who were grateful for basic jobs and housing. In reality, they were intelligence officers, saboteurs, and communication specialists who had been mapping coalition weaknesses for years. Status report from Sector 7, Sojin announced to the group gathered around her. Sungho has confirmed that coalition supply convoys are still following predictable routes. Their security protocols haven't changed since the war ended. Captain Daewon frowned. They're not taking any extra precautions? Even after fighting us for 3 years? Why would they? Sojin replied. As far as they know, all organized human resistance was destroyed 6 months ago. They think the war is over. On the coalition flagship above Earth, Admiral Veltar was indeed confident that his victory was complete. His morning briefing confirmed everything he expected. Survey teams were working efficiently. No signs of organized resistance had been detected, and the few human life signs were scattered and weak. Any communication intercepts? He asked his intelligence officer. Nothing significant, Admiral. Occasional short-range transmissions between survivor groups, but all in primitive human languages. No military codes or coordinated activities detected. Admiral Veltar nodded with satisfaction. The humans were finally broken, reduced to small groups of refugees trying to survive in their planet's ruins. Soon coalition colonists would arrive and begin building proper cities over the wreckage of human civilization. What the Admiral didn't know was that his intelligence officer was only monitoring traditional radio frequencies. The quantum communication network Sojin had established operated on principles the coalition's technology couldn't detect. Across the galaxy, human operatives continued their normal routines while secretly preparing for the next phase. Jiho made minor adjustments to battleship engines that would cause critical failures at exactly the right moment. Yujin identified key supply shipments that could be delayed or diverted. Dozens of other operatives prepared to activate sleeper protocols they had been carrying for years. On Earth, more coalition teams landed each day, mapping ruins and establishing temporary bases. They found exactly what they expected. A dead world with scattered survivors posing no threat to their colonization plans. They had no idea they were being watched by hundreds of hidden cameras, that their communications were being intercepted, or that their movements were being tracked and analyzed by people they thought were defeated. In her underground chamber, Sojin received another quantum transmission, this one from Woojin, her younger brother who had volunteered for an especially dangerous deep cover assignment. His message was brief but important. Package secured. Delivery system ready. Waiting for your signal. Sojin smiled and began composing her reply. The coalition had declared Earth fallen and humanity defeated. They had celebrated their victory and begun making plans for their new colony. Soon, They would learn the difference between defeating a human army and defeating humanity itself. In the Coalition Intelligence Division's main office on Proxima Station, HFY SEO finished updating the daily threat assessment reports. Her alien supervisors trusted her completely. She had been working for them for 6 years, ever since her rescue from a human refugee ship. They believed she was grateful for their protection and eager to help them understand human psychology and behavior. What they didn't know was that every report she filed contained subtle inaccuracies. Nothing obvious enough to raise suspicion, but enough to gradually mislead Coalition intelligence about human capabilities and intentions. When her quantum receiver activated with Sojin's signal, HFY knew it was time to stop being subtle. She accessed the Coalition's classified database and began downloading everything: fleet positions, supply routes, security protocols, invasion plans, and communication codes. The information flowed into hidden storage devices she had been preparing for this moment. At the same time, she started planting false data in the system. Reports that made Coalition forces appear stronger than they were, while making remaining human populations seem even weaker and more scattered than believed. On Earth, Commander Minseo Jang emerged from a hidden bunker in the mountains outside former Seoul. She had been a colonel in the Korean Army, before volunteering to lead the underground resistance network. For 6 months, she had kept 3,000 trained soldiers hidden in caves and tunnels throughout the region. The Coalition's sensors had detected some of them as civilian survivors, but they had no idea they were looking at an organized military force with weapons, equipment, and detailed intelligence about Coalition capabilities. "All units, this is Phoenix Command," she transmitted on encrypted frequencies to resistance cells across Earth. "The family reunion is about to begin. Confirm your readiness status." Responses came back from locations the Coalition had written off as empty ruins. Buried weapons caches were opened, communication networks activated, and carefully hidden soldiers prepared to emerge from months of concealment. Dr. Woo-jin Park, Sojin's brother, stood in the cargo bay of a Coalition transport ship orbiting Earth. Like the other humans aboard, he was supposed to be a refugee being relocated to a work colony. The Coalition guards thought he was just another civilian, grateful to be alive. Woo-jin was actually a quantum physics specialist who had spent 2 years infiltrating the Coalition's logistics network. The personal belongings in his bag contained components for something the Coalition had never seen before: a quantum cascade device that could disable their technology from the inside. "Approaching Earth orbital zone," announced the ship's captain, a lizard-like alien who barely paid attention to his human passengers. "Refugee relocation will begin in 6 hours." Woo-jin smiled and sent a coded signal to his sister. The final component of their plan was now in position. Admiral Veltar reviewed the latest reports from his survey teams with growing satisfaction. Earth's major population centers had been thoroughly mapped, and construction sites for Coalition cities had been selected. The first civilian colonist would arrive in just 2 weeks. "Any problems to report?" he asked his staff during the morning briefing. "Minor technical issues, Admiral," replied his chief engineer. "Some of our shuttles have been experiencing power fluctuations and a few communication relays have gone offline. Nothing that affects our operations." What the Admiral didn't know was that human saboteurs were already at work throughout his fleet. Jiho had installed subtle modifications in dozens of ship systems. Woo-jin had arranged for critical supply shipments to be delayed. Other operatives had planted surveillance devices and prepared for coordinated strikes. On Earth, Taehyun's surveillance network detected increased Coalition activity. More shuttles were landing, larger teams were being deployed, and temporary bases were being established near major ruins. "They're getting ready for the main colonization wave," he reported to Sojin and the other leaders. "Intelligence suggests the first civilian transports will arrive in 2 weeks." Sojin looked up from her quantum array, where she had been coordinating final preparations with operatives across the galaxy. "Perfect timing. Are our people ready?" Captain Daewon checked the reports from resistance cells across Earth. 3,000 trained soldiers, 500 intelligence specialists, 2,000 technical support personnel, and 15,000 civilian volunteers ready to assist. Weapon caches secured, communication networks established, targeting data confirmed. "What about our off-world assets?" Sojin asked. The answer came from her quantum receiver. Coded confirmations from human operatives on 47 coalition military installations, 32 supply depots, 18 communication hubs, and 12 major population centers. Everyone is in position, she announced. But first, we need to let the coalition know what they're really facing. Ha-Yawan's work at the intelligence division had given her access to the coalition's main communication network. At Sojin's signal, she activated a program she had been preparing for months, a virus that would broadcast a message on every coalition channel throughout the galaxy. The message was simple, but devastating. A recording of Sojin speaking calmly from her underground chamber. "This is Dr. Sojin Park of the Human Resistance Command. 6 months ago, you declared that Earth had fallen and humanity was defeated. You celebrated your victory and began planning your colonization of our world." The image shifted to show the underground complex where thousands of humans had been living and working in secret. "You were wrong. Earth never fell. We simply let you think it had." Admiral Veltar stared at his communication screen in shock as the transmission continued. Around him, his bridge crew struggled to cut off the signal, but it was coming from inside their own communication system. "For 8 years, we have been preparing for this war. Not just preparing our armies and weapons, but preparing our people. While you fought what you thought was humanity's military, our real strength was spreading throughout your territory." The message showed images of human operatives working on coalition ships, stations, and colonies, people the coalition had trusted as refugees and workers for years. "We are not refugees in your space. We are soldiers. Every human you see working in your facilities, maintaining your ships, coordinating your logistics, they are all part of the largest intelligence operation in galactic history." Veltar's aide rushed to his side with a data tablet. "Admiral, we're getting reports from across the fleet. Human workers are revealing hidden communication devices, surveillance equipment, and sabotage tools. They've been watching us for years." The transmission continued with Sojin's calm voice. "You declared Earth fallen because you destroyed our cities and silenced our communications. But humanity is not made of buildings and radio towers. Humanity is made of humans, and we are everywhere." On coalition bases across dozens of star systems, human workers were simultaneously revealing their true identities. Maintenance crews showed their hidden weapons. Communications specialists activated illegal monitoring equipment. Civilian coordinators opened secured storage containers filled with military gear. "The war you thought you won was just the opening move," Sojin's message concluded. "The real war begins now. And this time we're not defending, we're attacking." The transmission ended, leaving coalition commanders throughout the galaxy staring at shocked silence at their screens. In a single moment, they had learned that their greatest victory was actually their greatest mistake. Admiral Veltar turned to his intelligence officer, his voice shaking with rage and fear. "How many human workers do we have throughout the fleet?" The officer checked his records, his face growing pale as he counted. "Approximately 15,000, Admiral, on ships, stations, and supply facilities across 40 star systems. And they're all hostile agents?" Before the intelligence officer could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Engineering reported power failures, communications went offline, and weapon systems began experiencing mysterious malfunctions. In her underground chamber on Earth, Sojin activated the final phase of her quantum array. The device had been doing more than just coordinating communications. It had been quantum entangling critical systems throughout the coalition fleet. "Phase 3 begins now," she announced to her people. "Time to show them what humanity really looks like when we stop playing defense." Across the galaxy, 15,000 human operatives moved into action at exactly the same moment. On the battleship Determined Victory, Ji-Ho Kim dropped his maintenance tools and opened a hidden panel in his quarters. Inside were weapons, explosives, and a communication device that connected him directly to human command networks. He had spent 5 years learning every detail of coalition ship designs, and now he was ready to use that knowledge. "Engineering, this is Kim." He spoke into his communicator. "Using coalition protocols, I'm detecting unusual readings in the main engine core. Recommend immediate shutdown for safety inspection." The chief engineer, a slug-like alien named Gekton, approved the shutdown without question. He trusted Ji-Ho's technical expertise after years of reliable service. What Gekton didn't know was that Jiho had been gradually modifying the engine systems for months, creating hidden vulnerabilities that could be triggered remotely. As the engines went offline, Jiho activated his sabotage program. Throughout the ship, critical systems began failing in carefully orchestrated sequence. Life support fluctuated, artificial gravity became unstable, and weapon systems lost power. To the Coalition crew, it looked like a cascade failure caused by aging equipment. In reality, it was surgical sabotage designed to disable the ship without killing anyone unnecessarily. On Kepler Station, Eugene Lee was leading what appeared to be a normal coordination meeting with human refugee supervisors. The Coalition officials watching through security cameras saw nothing unusual, just humans organizing work, schedules, and discussing supply distribution. They didn't notice the coded hand signals Eugene was using, or the small devices being passed between the humans. When she gave the final signal, 200 human workers throughout the station revealed their true purpose. "Attention, Coalition personnel," Eugene announced over the station's communication system. "This is Eugene Lee, Major in the Human Resistance Command. This facility is now under human control. Surrender peacefully, and you will not be harmed." The station's security forces rushed to respond, but found their weapons disabled, their communication systems jammed, and their computer networks locked down. The humans had been preparing for this moment for years, learning every security protocol and identifying every weakness. On Earth, Commander Min Seo-jang led 3,000 soldiers out of their hidden bunkers and caves. They wore Coalition uniforms taken from captured supply shipments, and carried weapons that had been buried in secret caches years before. The war officially began. The Coalition, survey teams scattered across Earth's surface, suddenly found themselves surrounded by organized military forces who knew the terrain perfectly and had been watching their every move for months. "Coalition Survey Team Alpha, this is Commander Jang of the Human Resistance," she transmitted to the aliens working in Tokyo's ruins. "You are surrounded and outgunned. Lay down your weapons and prepare for transport to prisoner collection points." Lieutenant Sektar, the pilot who had been so confident about Earth's defeat, looked around in panic as human soldiers emerged from positions that had been invisible moments before. His communication equipment was being jammed, his shuttle was surrounded, and his backup support was nowhere to be found. "How is this possible?" he transmitted desperately. "Our scan showed no organized resistance." "Your scan showed exactly what we wanted them to show," Commander Jang replied calmly. "Surrender now, and you'll live to understand how badly you underestimated humanity." Dr. Woo Jin Park was still aboard the Coalition transport approaching Earth when the coordinated attacks began. The ship's crew was receiving panicked reports from across their territory. Human uprisings, system failures, and coordinated strikes happening simultaneously on dozens of worlds. "What's happening?" demanded the ship's captain as his bridge crew struggled to make sense of the chaos. Woo Jin stood up calmly and produced a small device from his personal belongings. "What's happening is that humanity is showing you what we're really capable of when we stop hiding." He activated the quantum cascade device he had been carrying. The ship's power systems immediately began shutting down in controlled sequence, while backup systems prevented life-threatening failures. "Don't worry," Woo Jin told the terrified Coalition crew. "We're not murderers like you are. Your ship is disabled, not destroyed. You'll live to be prisoners of war instead of occupying conquerors." On the Coalition flagship above Earth, Admiral Veltar was receiving disaster reports from across his command territory. Ship after ship was reporting critical failures. Space stations were being taken over by human workers, and supply lines were collapsing as human saboteurs revealed themselves. "How many facilities are affected?" he demanded from his communications officer. "At last count, Admiral, 47 major installations, over 200 supply ships, and 18 planetary defense networks. The humans have been infiltrating our infrastructure for years." Admiral Veltar slammed his fist on the command console. "This is impossible. Our intelligence reports showed scattered refugees with no coordinated command structure." His aide approached nervously with a data tablet. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It's from their resistance leadership." The main screen activated to show Sojin in her underground command center, surrounded by quantum communication equipment and tactical displays showing human operations across the galaxy. "Admiral Veltar," she said calmly, I am Dr. Sojin Park, and I speak for all of humanity. 6 months ago, you declared Earth fallen and humanity defeated. Today, you're learning the difference between winning battles and winning wars. Behind her, tactical displays showed the scope of human operations. Red indicators marking coalition facilities under attack, blue arrows showing human troop movements, and green signals confirming successful sabotage operations across dozens of star systems. For 8 years, we have been placing our people throughout your territory, not as conquerors but as students, learning your technology, mapping your weaknesses, earning your trust while preparing for this moment. Admiral Veltar found his voice. You're terrorists and saboteurs. The Galactic Coalition will not negotiate with— We're not terrorists, Sojin interrupted firmly. We're soldiers, and we're not here to negotiate. We're here to inform you that your invasion of Earth is over, and your occupation of human space ends now. The displays behind her updated to show coalition ships throughout the sector losing power, space stations going offline, and supply convoys being intercepted by human forces that appeared seemingly from nowhere. You thought you were fighting a primitive species that got lucky with some advanced weapons, Sojin continued. What you were actually fighting was a coordinated intelligence operation, 8 years in the making, supported by the most patient and determined species you've ever encountered. Tae-hyun appeared on screen beside her with updated tactical information. Admiral, your fleet currently has engine power on 30% of your ships. Your communication networks are compromised across 15 star systems. Your supply lines have been cut in 42 locations. And that's just the beginning. Admiral Veltar looked around his bridge at the damage reports flooding in from across his command. His most trusted ships were reporting critical failures. His most secure facilities were being taken over by people he had considered harmless refugees. What do you want? He asked, his voice barely concealing his desperation. Sojin's expression remained calm but implacable. We want you to leave human space. All coalition forces will withdraw beyond the boundaries that existed before you began your expansion toward Earth. All human prisoners and forced workers will be released immediately. And you will never ever try to invade human territory again. And if we refuse? Sojin gestured toward her tactical displays, where the scope of human infiltration was becoming clear. Coalition installations were going offline one by one, and human forces were emerging from hiding places throughout occupied territory. Admiral, you've seen what we can accomplish when we're trying not to kill anyone unnecessarily. Do you really want to find out what we can do when we stop being merciful? For the first time in his military career, Admiral Veltar realized he was completely outmaneuvered and outnumbered by an enemy he had never really understood. Admiral Veltar stared at the tactical displays showing the collapse of his invasion force. In less than 6 hours, 8 years of coalition expansion had been reversed by an enemy they thought they had defeated. Admiral, his communications officer reported with trembling voice, we're receiving surrender requests from 43 installations. The humans are offering safe passage to any coalition forces who withdraw peacefully. They're offering us mercy? Veltar asked in disbelief. Sojin's voice came through the communication channel, clear and steady. Admiral, humanity doesn't wage war for conquest or revenge. We fight to protect our people and our freedom. Surrender now, withdraw your forces, and this ends without further casualties. Veltar looked around his bridge at officers who had served with him for decades. They were all staring at him, waiting for orders that could determine the fate of millions of coalition citizens throughout the occupied territories. And if I order my forces to fight to the last ship? He asked. Sojin's expression didn't change, but something cold entered her eyes. Then you'll learn why every species that has ever encountered humanity in combat has learned to respect our determination. She gestured to Dr. Wu Jin, who had appeared on screen beside her with a device that looked like nothing in coalition technology databases. My brother has been working on something we hoped we'd never have to use, Sojin explained. It's based on the same quantum technology we've been using to coordinate our operations, but scaled up considerably. Wu Jin held up the device, which hummed with barely contained energy. This is a quantum cascade generator. Every piece of coalition technology in human space has been quantum entangled with our network over the past 8 years. With this device, we can disable every coalition ship, station, and weapon simultaneously. That's impossible, Veltar protested. Quantum entanglement doesn't work that way. You're right, Wu Jin admitted with a slight smile. It doesn't work that way according to coalition physics. But you never understood human physics. We've been developing quantum technology for decades while you thought we were just learning to build faster-than-light drives. So Jin leaned forward, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. Admiral, humanity spent 8 years infiltrating your territory not just to gather intelligence but to prepare for this exact moment. Every human worker who touched your technology, every refugee who repaired your equipment, every civilian who cleaned your facilities, they were all placing quantum markers that connect to our network. Behind her, tactical displays showed the true scope of human preparation. Thousands of quantum connection points throughout coalition space, all linked to the device Wu Jin was holding. One signal from this device, and every coalition ship loses power. Every weapon system shuts down. Every life support system switches to emergency backup. We can end this war in 60 seconds, Admiral. The question is whether you want to end it peacefully or the hard way. Commander Min Seo appeared on the screen with an update from Earth's surface. All coalition survey teams have surrendered. Earth is secure. Our forces are ready to begin liberation operations on occupied human colonies throughout the sector. Captain Dae Won added his report from the Resistance Coordination Center. Human populations on 17 worlds are ready to emerge from hiding. Coalition occupation forces are isolated and cut off from supply lines. They're requesting terms for peaceful withdrawal. Admiral Veltar realized the full scope of what humanity had accomplished. While he had been celebrating his victory over Earth, the humans had been systematically infiltrating and undermining his entire command structure. They had turned his own infrastructure against him and prepared contingencies he couldn't even imagine. "How long have you been planning this?" he asked quietly. "Since the moment we detected your first scout ships entering human space," Sojin replied. 15 years ago, our governments began preparing for the possibility of contact with hostile alien species. We didn't know it would be you specifically, but we knew someone would eventually try to take our worlds from us. She stood up from her command chair, and the camera pulled back to show the full extent of her underground facility. Hundreds of humans were working at communication stations, tactical displays, and quantum technology arrays. What you never understood about humanity, Admiral, is that we don't just fight with armies and weapons. We fight with our entire species. Every human is a potential soldier, spy, engineer, or strategist. When you threaten our survival, you're not fighting our military, you're fighting our entire civilization. Taehyun updated the tactical display to show human forces emerging from hiding throughout coalition space. On dozens of worlds, human populations that had been written off as refugees or slave workers were revealing themselves as organized resistance cells. "You thought you conquered human space," Sojin continued. "What you actually did was spread humanity throughout your own territory. Every human you relocated, every worker you trusted, every refugee you ignored, they were all reporting back to us, learning your capabilities, and preparing for liberation." Admiral Veltar watched his command structure collapse in real time. His most trusted installations were surrendering to humans who had been living among them for years. His most powerful ships were being disabled by sabotage programs installed by maintenance workers he had never suspected. "What are your terms?" he asked finally. "Complete withdrawal of all coalition forces from human space," Sojin replied immediately. "Release of all human prisoners and forced workers. Recognition of human territorial sovereignty. And a non-aggression treaty that guarantees this never happens again." "And if the Coalition Council refuses to accept these terms?" Sojin looked directly into the camera, and Admiral Veltar saw something in her eyes that made him understand why humanity had survived countless wars throughout their history. "Admiral, you've seen what we can accomplish when we're trying to minimize casualties and preserve your infrastructure. You've seen how we can coordinate operations across dozens of star systems, while remaining completely hidden from your intelligence networks. You've seen how we can turn your own people against you without them even realizing it." She paused, letting the full implications sink in. "Do you really want to find out what we can do when we decide to stop being subtle?" Behind her, Wu Jin held up the quantum cascade device, its energy patterns pulsing with readiness. Throughout coalition space, human operatives waited for the signal that would either end the war peacefully or begin the complete dismantling of the coalition's military capacity. "The choice is yours, Admiral," Sojin said quietly. "But understand this, humanity has drawn our final line. Cross it again, and there won't be a coalition left to regret the decision. Admiral Veltar looked around his bridge one last time, then activated his fleet-wide communication system. All coalition forces, this is Admiral Veltar. Begin immediate withdrawal from human territorial space. All operations are suspended pending negotiation of surrender terms. He closed the channel and looked back at Sojin's image on his screen. The coalition will remember this, he said. Sojin nodded calmly. Good, that's the point. Remember that you declared Earth had fallen, Admiral. Remember that you celebrated the defeat of humanity. And remember that we were never really defeated. We were just getting started. The communication ended, leaving Admiral Veltar staring at a blank screen as his invasion fleet began its humiliating withdrawal from human space. On Earth, in her underground command center, Sojin turned to her fellow resistance leaders. Captain Daewon, Commander Minseo Taehyun, and Dr. Wu Jin, the humans who had coordinated the largest intelligence operation in galactic history. Is it over? Asked Hyejin, the older woman who had worried about their chances from the beginning. Sojin looked at the tactical displays showing coalition forces withdrawing throughout human space, and human populations emerging from years of hiding and forced labor. The invasion is over, she said. But this was never just about stopping one invasion. This was about making sure it never happens again. She activated her quantum communication array one final time, broadcasting on frequencies that would reach every human in the galaxy. This is Dr. Sojin Park of the Human Resistance Command. The coalition invasion of Earth has been defeated. Human space is free. Our people throughout the galaxy are safe. She paused, looking around at the faces of the humans who had never given up hope. They declared Earth had fallen, but Earth was never theirs to declare anything about. Earth belongs to humanity, and humanity doesn't surrender. Outside, the first human ships in 8 months began breaking through Earth's atmosphere, returning home from battles fought across the galaxy by people the enemy had never even known existed. The war was over. Humanity had won, and the galaxy would never underestimate them again.